Hello, welcome to Ears to the East, and today we're going to be
Hello.
starting a little bit of a thing that I think we might occasionally do, which is actually looking back a bit. Now, we've got a lot of Baby Metal fans on this channel and also on this podcast. And so what we thought we'd do is, whereas a lot of time we're talking about things that are happening right now and things happening in the future, we'd look back and really discuss how an album's held up. And in this case, we're looking at the very first ever self-entitled Baby Metal album. Thank you, ultra fanboy down there, ready to go. Flag in the background behind Neon. The truth is, this album obviously was a very big part of the Japanese sort of music revolution, sort of really spreading out into the world. Yeah, there'd been instances of it before, but, ever since really 2012, there's been such a breakout. I think this album actually, according to Spotify, came out in 2014, but okay.
Yes, I think
But
that's correct.
they had been, Baby Metal had been sort of making a mark for a couple of years before that, I believe. But 2014 was when the album came out. That's when they really sort of started cementing that they were like a legit thing, a really, a full album, really interesting album. That's what we're going to be discussing today. But the question is, as that was their first one, it was before they had the Kami band. It was at a time when they were still basically an idol group who did metal rather than a metal group in a lot of people's opinions. How does this first album stand up? Is it something we still go back to? Does it stand the test of time, or does it sound dated? And just generally talk about this album. All right, which one of you two ultra Babe Metal fans is going to dive in now that I've exhausted myself on that intro and have some coffee that I need to get around to consuming?
I
I'll,
can,
yeah, I
or
was
you
going
can
to say,
go first
no,
too.
I was going to say, I'll let the man who's got it dotted on his skin go first.
Also, yeah.
It's a pretty good way of doing it. So, well, you've got the tattoo.
And no, but you started with saying they didn't have the Kami band, obviously not the Kami live band, but they
Well,
did have musicians for their music, I would say. I actually don't know if
one
it
sentence
was.
in, I'm getting schooled.
I mean, you know that yourself. That's not a secret.
Yeah,
They
yeah,
weren't
yeah,
called the Kami band,
yeah.
and we don't know if it's the same people, I think. Do we know?
I believe my understanding is that it was not. My understanding is that it was session musicians who were hired especially for the project, but I am doing that based on things I've heard. I don't have any direct evidence for that.
Yeah, but like the Kami band was that as well, right? Just they were hired again and again, and then they came
Yeah, I
kind
think
of became
that
regular.
was more. Well, that's a good question because that was more of a cemented thing. So I don't know if any of the people who later became the Kami band were maybe brought in because they were part of that original one. So yeah, we don't know. I think it's probably the best way, best thing to say there.
So yeah, we took a listen to the whole album, at least Neon and I think Howard did as well, listening to the whole album
I
again.
did. I did.
And I have to say, it's really hard for me to give an objective opinion about this because I've heard all of these songs like hundreds of times before. Um, I know them just in and out. It's. Yeah. Do you really want me to show?
Flash the ink. Flash the ink. Yeah.
Um, but still, I have to say, I really enjoyed every second of this. I mean, I'm totally biased, obviously, but
At least you're
still
honest
think
about it.
all these tracks really held up. And I don't know if do you want to go through the whole track list because there are some tracks I really want to talk about a little bit more in detail, like the very first track, for example, Baby Metal Death. I think it deserves to get talked about.
Yeah. Talk about whatever you want to talk about. I mean, that's what we're here for.
I mean, we can talk about the live stuff as well, but let's just say talk about the
I
start of Baby Metal because to me, I knew, I heard Gimme Chocolate on YouTube, and I think that's probably the way it goes for most people discovering Baby Metal. Heard a track or something or two on YouTube, and then bought an album and listened to the album. And for me, it was the first album, and I still was like, I heard songs like Catch Me If You Can and Gave Me Chocolate, and I was like, yeah, the metal stuff, I really like it, but the other stuff I'm not so sure about yet. And then I start this album, Baby Metal Death, blows me away. It's so like relentless and unhinged metal, just straight in your face. And just the little sprinkles of the vocals to get you to remind you there's something else to it. But like really that just erased every doubt I had about this not being metal. So I think it's the perfect first track for Baby Metal, in my opinion. Help me out. What's your
I'm gonna
thoughts
let
about
Neon
it?
speak. Because you already know my thoughts about that track, so I'm gonna let Neon speak.
I always try to remain quiet because I already know how it usually speaks up at these parts. So I'm like, yeah, there's no point trying to battle him
Hey, this is
for
a
when it
Baby
comes to
Metal one.
waffle.
I don't have to carry the conversation as much this week.
I agree. Bay Metal Death is one of those songs that even to this day still holds up. It's a banging album as well. I think it's one of those songs which really kind of highlights the impact that I think Big Metal will have over the last couple of years. And I feel like it's one of those intro songs where it's like, yeah, we're here to have fun. It's cute. But there's also some like, no, we're here to play some metal as well. I know it is like the most repetitive song. I mean,
Yes, that's true.
I've heard people turn around and say, "Oh, it's just like the same thing over and over again." But I can't. I don't know if it's just me, but I can't listen to this album without listening to that song first. I can't listen to any live show without hearing "Baby Metal Dance," "Baby Metal Dance," like just all the
I
time.
mean,
It's
it's kind of unofficially their intro song.
yeah, it's one of those just like really iconic songs. I think if we looking back at obviously how that song's been used, not recently, but looking back as just like as an intro to an album, um, you know, going back 10 years or whatever, then I actually think it's really amazing. I actually think it's one of those intros where like if I was listening to that back then, I'd be like, hell yeah, I quite like this intro. This is good. Breaking into that. If I didn't know anything about Bay Metal and this was the first thing I heard, I'd be like, okay, I'm pumped. You've got me invested, and I can't wait to hear what the songs are. So as an intro, I think it's brilliant. I think it's brilliant. Does everything you need it to and want it to, I think.
I think it also kind of intentionally is the most metal song.
Yeah, I will. I mean, I'll just quickly say because I know I've been on this one before. For me, like I say, I'm kind of always. It's hard for me not to skip it. It's kind of like for me, it's this weird thing at the beginning of the album that just seems out of place. It's nearly 6 minutes long. It kind of repeats, and I think I do. I hear what you say. I do.
Just the first minute, it's just this angelic choir.
But to me, I do get what you mean about if you come into it as a metalhead, I get it. It's really good as like sort of like it's that thing that builds you up. I think probably for me the biggest problem is that it doesn't actually feel like it's building up. It just sort of like it starts with that intro and then it's just itself, and it's not really what I come to baby metal for, because I like the metal, but what I actually like about baby metal is the fact that it's kind of like it's a juxtaposition between two things. And I know some people say, oh, well, baby metal are doing the cute little vocal, but it's like they're just kind of occasionally talking. It doesn't really feel like it's not really what I come to baby metal for. So for me, actually, it's one of my least favorite baby metal songs altogether, which is surprising considering this album's got some of my favorites on there. It's just
but
like
that
for
fact
me,
is actually not surprising to me.
yeah, no, I get that. And again, this is why I'm not going to sort of go over it too much, because I think no one's overly surprised it's one of my least favorites. I just kind of feel like, if anything, its greatest purpose is that you're so relieved when it's over that it gives Megitsune twice as much power when Megitsune goes.
Oh, that sounds really bad.
It's not that it's bad. It's just I do kind of
I'm
get
just
like
glad it's over.
yeah, it's like it's kind of like no, but when you hear something and you're like, okay, this is good, but like I'm excited for this album, and you're actually draining my excitement. It's like, come on, let's get to the bit where shit goes crazy. Because for me, it's like it's loud, but it's not crazy. It's just it's like, come on, let's get to the bit where it goes
comes
crazy.
down to like what kind of music you usually listen to, because as we established already, as a metalhead, this is a perfect intro because it just erases your doubt of this not being metal. If you had any doubt about it because you heard their cutesy vocals and stuff.
Though? Do you need 6 minutes to know that it's gonna?
Again,
maybe not, but it's just a statement. It's just relentless metal. I love it as a metalhead. I can listen to this all the time. I don't find it boring or repetitive. I mean, it is kind of repetitive, but it doesn't bother me at all.
That's fair enough. Yeah, I would actually say it's probably also, and this is where I think this is a subject we might discuss on a future video, because I'm thinking about doing a video about this myself. I would say actually it doesn't feel like a particularly heavy track for me because of the fact that it loses some of its steam by repeating too much. So for me, it actually feels it's not one of the heavier tracks on the album, in my opinion. Although it maybe starts that way, it ends up feeling like one of the less impactful songs just because it goes for too long. And so it's by the end, you're not feeling quite the same impact that you do with other songs that come up later on the album, which are
No, I might be influenced by the Legend 1997 performance, which is usually how I consume this song, because to me this is just a perfect stage production, and I really feel that kind of validates the length of the song, because it feels like a theatrical performance.
This is the hardest thing, though, is trying to separate, like, does this album stand up to, like, the live performance? Pretending like you're listening to this album without knowing how they utilize it in their live performances. And I think you look at this album in a slightly different way. I had the same problem coming into this, because I listened to the album again this morning, which was actually the first time I listened to the studio version of this album in quite a long time, actually. Because when I go back to the original songs, like I always pick a live version, I always pick a Blu-ray, or I always pick this. And I was actually quite taken back, probably because when they play it live, their distortion is always max. The Kami band are freaking ripping it. And I was actually listening to this album, and I was like quite actually taken back by quite how soft this whole entire album was. I was kind of listening to it this morning, and I was like, I remember this being a lot heavier.
Well, this actually raises an interesting question, because I mean, obviously, that what we're really discussing here is, does the album hold up? And this is an album that I enjoy very much, but I'm always kind of curious when, like, the more metal fans say they really like the debut album. I do wonder whether they are more thinking about the live versions, but I kind of want to really focus on, does the album hold up? Because anyone can update their songs by playing them live with their more current sound, or updating the live sound. Or let's face it, when you play things live, there's always going to be a certain degree of like a big stage quality to it, which is going to give everything an extra life, you know. But as an album, does it hold up? I would say that
let me ask you, like, do you mean hold up in terms of enjoyment just, or in terms of compared to metal we have like today?
Well, I think those two questions are kind of intertwined with each other. I think in a way it was rather telling that, as Neon mentioned, when he goes back to listen to these songs, he listens for live version. Now, yeah, I know people could say, well, look, a lot of people prefer the live versions. That's fine. But it is interesting. If you took those away, would you still enjoy those songs in their original form enough to be listening to them today, alongside the songs that you've had since, alongside the general development of Japanese metal, because we've had so much more come out since then? Does it hold up against its peers now, or does it only hold up when you hear the live versions? I think there is a kind of an intertwined question with that. I mean, if I were to be entirely honest, I think that the album holds up because in one way, the reason it holds up is because there's so much fun on there, and because it has this sense of playing with so many ideas. I mean, the follow-up album played with a lot of new ideas as well, so it's not like they ran out. But this debut album,
arguably the third one even more.
I mean, yeah, but these are different. I think the first album played with the fusion of pop and metal. The second one was very much experimenting with different types of metal, and the third one was very much different types of production. I think different sounds. I think with this album,
influences.
Yeah, I think this album definitely has a feeling that it really taps into J-pop, which makes it very interesting. I mean, I think it's why so many other albums and artists followed in the wake, because the fact that they so well captured J-pop and metal in a way that convinced both audiences was great. But I do think it's interesting because I don't know how much I really go back to these songs, because of the fact that we've had so many artists who've done, in the wake of BABYMETAL, we've had artists who've done so many interesting combinations of pop and metal since, and most of them inferior to BABYMETAL. But we've also had some really interesting takes. I think we've heard so many fusions of J-pop and metal now that it does make it an interesting thing. Does it?
I think if you're comparing this album to like the likes of, like, I don't know, Hanabiya or something like that, I like Hanabiya. I think the quality and the metal aspect and stuff like that like really outshines this album. But that's it's so hard to compare though. But then the thing
it's an interesting comparison though.
Yeah, the thing that makes this album special for me though is a couple of things. One, it's the cuteness. As well, like the girls were all amazingly cute back then. It's something they probably can't capture as much now as they could then, but that's still there. Like that magic of like having them at that age. I know some people think obviously a bit young, bit creepy, but I personally like it. It's the innocence and stuff like that that really kind of comes from this, and you can tell that they're
Charming.
having fun. It's charming, yeah, and that really like radiates and oozes from this album. You can just tell like everybody here is just really having a good time, and that's just what it's all about. And I like that, and you feel it when you listen to it. But also, what I want to say is, can we just like appreciate like Sue's vocals here as well? Like, how old was she here? Like 15, 14 when this was recorded. Her vocals
20, yeah.
still, her
Tattoo
vocals,
Man, let us know.
yeah, her
When it
vocals.
was recorded, I'm not sure when exactly it was recorded.
I think it would have been recorded between 2012 and 2014 would be
Yeah.
my guess.
Yeah, it would be around about that time. But Sue's vocals, like, they still hold up now. Like, you go back and listen to that, and you can't believe that she's the age she is for when pumping out some of those vocals, which is absolutely crazy. It's what's even more crazier is to think that she's a better vocalist now than she was probably back then, which obviously comes with time and experience. But even then, listening to this album, to have a 14, 15-year-old girl carrying a whole entire album on her shoulders, really, I can't not listen to that and go just wow. Like, I don't think you could drop any 14, 15-year-old girl in that situation and have it sound so good. I think the difference is you could have any girl sing those parts just as good as Suzuka, but I don't think you could have anybody that has her personality, her range and her just like vocal style on that album as well. It's really weird. Again, we've seen so many like YouTube covers over the year of Baby Metal songs, and they all sound great. But they're all not Sue as well at the same time. And she has that special spark or something, which I feel like only her at that moment, in that time, in this dimension, could have pulled that off as well as she did. And I do look at that and I think if that was anybody else singing, would it hit as hard as it does? And I don't think it would. No, not at that age, not with at that time. And I think that's amazing. I also think what the most brilliant thing they did at the time was really market the hell out of Give Me Chocolate as well.
Mm.
That caught so many people's attention, and I think it did the right thing. It introduced them to a song that was both metal but both cutesy and kawaii at the same time. And it just everything about the album sets up nicely. Now, so, like I said before, going back to it, I was actually surprised. I remember this being a lot more. But again, that's going back to what Benedict said. Like I always listen to the live versions of this, which is one of the things Big Metal are most known for. Their live performances are awesome. They're very much a theatric band, their performances. So you always gravitate towards that, or at least I do personally. I mean, let me know in the comments if I'm wrong there, or you don't. But I always go there.
I think anyone will.
Yeah, coming back to the
I'm not sure I
album,
do, to be honest. But,
coming back to the studio album, it just felt like those guitar parts were lacking a little bit, just because I'm so used to some of the guitar parts now on the live versions being turned up to like 11, whereas it feels a little bit less impactful looking back on it now. But if I didn't have those live performances in my mind for what I think that is, I think coming into this album and listening to it was really good, and it still holds up now. If I was actually a bit surprised by like it's not as
I think there was
impactful as I thought it was.
a few points you covered there. I just wanted to circle back around to one of them, which was the point about the vocals, because I know you mentioned Sue. I think it's probably a combination of all three of them, just to bring in Benedict's favorite person as well. But I think it's a combination of all three of them. But I think, moreover, like you said, I don't think there were some examples, but there just wasn't really a good precedent for doing a proper metal album that had those kind of vocals, which is why, again, it's so impressive that they hit the ground running in such a really effective way. And some of that has to be given as credit to the writers, because obviously when they first came into this, they weren't as familiar with the three girls weren't as familiar with metal, and so they were kind of like being taught into it as well. So the writers did a good job of setting up the songs. But I think so. The point I wanted to make was that Neon mentioned that
you have to say they kind of nailed it because of their success.
Well,
undoubtedly.
The point that I think Neon made that I think is rather pertinent there is that he mentioned there's been so many covers of those songs subsequently, and they haven't quite hit the nail on the head. And I think one of the reasons why is because of the fact that they they don't realize that actually probably the thing that makes that album so charming is that they're not singing it as metal, they're singing it as a pop song, and yet it just works. And so in a way, the fact that they're using these clean, bright, chirpy vocals actually is part of what makes it work, because a lot of the people you hear doing covers, they do a great job, but they're trying to sing it with more power and they're trying to give it a little bit more of that feel. And it's like, that's not really what this album's about. This album's actually about that juxtaposition. So in a way, I think that a lot of the elements that are not as heavy are what make the album so unique, because the heaviness is undeniable, even if it's not as heavy as the live versions.
I'm really glad that when they recorded this album as well, that they didn't make Sue change her voice. Like even at that age, she had quite a low sort of tone to her voice, and I'm really glad that they kept that and just let her naturally throw, rather than go in the Moa and Yui direction, which obviously complements Sue really well. But you can tell that they're obviously a lot higher on purpose, trying to give that cutesy factor. And I think that's one of the things that really sells this album as well, to like a normal, I think, Western person at the time, where is Sue doesn't overbear it. It's not squeaky. It's not trying to be artificially cutesy at the same time. It's just her singing the song, and it feels natural. It feels like, oh, this is good.
You know, when you watch a lot of Baby Metal reactions, you see that kind of reaction a lot. That, I don't know, they listen to a Baby Metal song for the first time, and first it starts out with Yui and more, and they're like, and then Sue comes in and they're like, oh. It's really, I saw that a lot. Yeah.
Yeah, so again, I can't give props off to Sue enough on this album. I do really think she makes it. And one of my personal favorites as well from this album is actually all the Black Baby Metal stuff that we get here as well. Like the Yui and Moa songs. I love those songs, which is kind of like the reverse. It's kind of like it's super cutie, but those songs actually hit a little bit harder than the rest on the album.
Yon, 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 everybody, yon, yon, yon.
And
I wanted to get back to that. You both said it's kind of, should we say, a bit, how do you put it? I wouldn't call it less heavy, actually. I think it's a bit more raw and maybe a bit less on the production side of things. Because, yeah, I try to listen to how much do they do with like background layers and synths and stuff. And it's pretty, there's not too much, I would say. There's the occasional synth line that's pretty obvious, or some parts where it's just no electric guitars and you have some harpsichord stuff or strings going on. But other than that, there's not too much. And compare that to their later songs, there's kind of a lot going on comparably.
I agree. I think with this album as well, I definitely feel like on the production side, they didn't know where they were going a little bit. Like this was a new thing. They didn't know. I don't think they knew how to tackle it. There's definitely parts of this album where they're like, "Oh, let's make this heavy," but then they're like, "We don't want to make it too heavy. Like we want to keep it in this kind of like weird ballpark between." Like how it's like J-pop and metal, and even though they knew what they wanted to do, which was like let's combine the two, I feel like that some parts of the songs, and especially with the mixing, they're like we don't want to go too far in either direction, and it does come across a little bit some of the songs as like sort of mid, like it doesn't do either one like particularly well, but in a weird, strange kind of way that actually works, because if you look at anything else at that time, there is nothing like that. And like you look at that now, like 10 years on, I don't think there really is still anything quite like that.
No, but
Because
I'm not sure if I would agree actually for the first album, because to me the first album feels kind of they went a bit more extreme in certain directions, and I feel like Metal Resistance compared to the first album feels a bit more focused down. Like let's not go too far here or here.
But that's because they knew what they were going to do then. They knew what they wanted coming into the second album.
Yeah.
Like they were like, we've done that on the first, let's try and focus on this. And
But I just wanted to say that really makes the first album feel very raw to me. That's just the essence or like the basic idea of kawaii metal.
I think I kind of agree with both of you there, in that I don't know that I would necessarily word it as saying that they were like didn't know what they wanted. I think they did know what they wanted. I think the thing is that what they wanted was just to expect
more
I
the
think,
execution of what they want. They
yeah,
definitely came in with an idea.
You can, I think you
that
can tell there's
that's
less
the
money involved.
that's the area where that's probably the only area that I would disagree. I think they did know what they wanted because they were experimenting, they were having fun. And I think that's what you hear as you hear them. I think that there's a lot of ideas that are very thoroughly executed. And if anything, the fact that they didn't really know who the audience was means that they never pull back from anything. So for example, you get things like Ine that they wouldn't do Ine now, I don't think. But the fact that they played that idea out was because of the fact that there wasn't really, now I think they'd be a little bit concerned about, is that really on brand? I don't know, but I suspect they might be. Well, actually, to be honest, in the last year or so, they've gone much more crazy again, so maybe not. But basically, there are a lot of songs
That's
on
also,
there.
I think, the best example for they went really extreme in either direction. That very poppy style, and then you have like the one of the heaviest breakdowns in any baby metal song. Yeah, and the rap it also.
This is kind of thing though. So I would agree that there is a little bit of, it doesn't quite land on anything hugely, and some of the songs maybe as a result come off a little bit like they're not quite, like Neon says, not quite nailing anything perfectly. But to me, it's not because they weren't sure. I feel like it's just that they were playing around and their ideas maybe got a little bit out in front of them. It seems very full of fun, whereas again, Metal Resistance, like you say, is much more focused. They know who their audience is or who they want to appeal to much more there. So the ideas are amazing, but much more kind of like, okay, we know from the outset what we're doing here. So it's always hard to attribute that, but I would say that there's nothing to me that sounds cautious on BABYMETAL, the debut album. It sounds like an album that seems very enthusiastic and maybe is a little bit over enthusiastic to do many things rather than cautious.
I think that's a good way to put it.
But that's why I love it.
Like.
It's so refreshing, and you can understand why it's refreshing to listen to now. So you can understand how refreshing that was. I remember when I told a story, so I'll keep it quick. But when I was at that party, and the very first time I ever heard BABYMETAL, and I was at that party, and just was a party in my house, so it should have been at it. And someone was like, "Oh, quick, throw on this song. It's called like Headbanger." I was like, "Well, okay." So what's this going to be? And then just like the video starts up, and I'm like, this is mad. Cool. It's like, and that was the first time I heard them.
Madness.
And you couldn't help but be dragged into just the fact that the lack of restraint. I think that's what a lot of people struggled with during the duet era of BABYMETAL, is that they didn't quite have that chaotic, anything can happen kind of energy, which again, just comes from what they are. But yeah, no, I kind of agree with both of you, but maybe in a different wording.
No, but coming back to the point, I really think this album holds up perfectly well. I don't know what doesn't make it hold up today. I can't tell you any reason.
It does sound a bit older. It doesn't quite sound as like a lot of there's been a lot more nuance added to like production and stuff that we hear in these kind of, so it definitely does sound a decade old.
It does, yeah.
I agree with that, but to me that doesn't really take away from the fact that it's a great album. Yeah.
Sorry, I was interrupting Neil there.
Oh, no, I agree. It definitely sounds a little bit older as well. But I think what really kind of like makes this album shine as well is the kind of like I'm trying to think of the right word here. The
build up.
I know. I'm trying. Like my mind's gone blank. I'm trying to think of it like the. I must say like the charisma, the power behind this album. Still, like you look at what this album did for the entire metal scene. Not only when it launched, but in the subsequent years after, and it changed the metal landscape a lot. And it did. I think it did so for the better. I mean, I remember when it first came out, it got a lot of pushback from the metal community. A lot of people in general were like, "Is this a joke? Is this to be taken seriously?" I think a lot of people didn't know what this was, and it didn't. I don't think it clicked instantly. It took a lot of time and years, even after this album was released, for a lot of people to look back at this fondly and kind of accept it for what it was a little bit.
Do you
And
think
that
it was fueled by the normies? Because I probably wouldn't have been considered a traditional metalhead as much as I did listen to metal at the time. But it was people like me who were like, yeah, more of this, please.
I think it was a little bit of both. I think it was a bit of from like the normies and the Japanese side that was definitely promoting this. But I also think the girls need a lot of credit for this. And although I know a lot of people are going to be like, "Oh, for fuck's sake, Neon," but I think
I think also
Cobra
a
deserves
lot of big
credit.
names came out and said, like, supported Baby Metal and said,
Well,
like, Baby Metal
that's
is a
what I mean.
great
Yeah,
thing. Like Rob Zombie, they played with Korn, I think. Yeah,
Cobra did
big
everything
names.
right there in promotion. Like he made the girls play the big festivals. He got in with the more of the Western bands,
Yeah.
and I think it took a couple of years, but I think they sort of got more accepted. And I think that. And I think the direction again. I don't want to go too much in the second album because we might do a second video on this. I don't know, but
We probably will.
I think the follow up of that album and what was going on made a lot of people really like the first album a lot more. And I think where their first album came out, it was a bit like. By the time the second one came out and they were more worldwide known at that point, I think looking back on that first album, a lot of people were like, actually, you know what? This is pretty cool. And I got a lot of love for the first album. It's always one of my favorites. Just look at some of the crazy music videos we got back then as well, like Doki Doki Morning and stuff
Yeah.
like that. It was absolutely amazing. Like I said, the girls were so cute by then. And I don't think we've seen anything like that since. I mean, we've had like like girl groups and stuff like that, and quite some young ones, but I don't think there's been any. I can honestly say that I've been like enamored with like Baby Metal was. They were just everything at the time just felt right, from their music to the lineup, to the songs that they were doing, to their personalities, to their stage presence, the choreography. Everything just fit. And I gotta say that if anything was just slightly off, even a little bit, I don't think we'd have like the Baby Metal we have today.
Yeah, I think it must be said as well, and I think it's worth pointing out this contrast. One of the things that I think is most impressive is just how varied all the bands in their wake have been. There's been so many groups who've been so varied. The fact that we have stuff like Passcode, which is like kind of doing the same thing but in a totally different way. The fact that we got those groups who've approached, Hannah Beer again, it's a totally different. It's not really the same thing.
I think really the success of this album opened up the musical realm, or
It did.
took away the fear of people. We can't do that because that's too out there.
I think it made it less of a Japanese niche and more of a, hey, look, this is actually like a great way to spread into the world. The world likes it. Obviously, the internet was like, social media was taken off around that time. So it meant this kind of thing could get out and people could enjoy it. Whereas if you'd done it back in 2004, you'd have struggled to have got to the audience. I think it was the right album at the right time. Did the right thing with the right people, the right group. Obviously, we had Kyary Pammy Pammy was showing off a bit of Japanese insanity with Pom 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 at the same time. We had Gangnam Style coming out in 2012. It was like Asia was exploding, but we needed someone to go, look, the thing Japan does best is not giving a shit about your genre limitations. And that's what Baby Metal did better than
Can I ask you then, do you think if we would live in a horrible alternate universe where Baby Metal wouldn't exist, do you think there would just be another group that took that spot? Or do you think like the music scene would just look totally different nowadays?
It would have happened.
You wouldn't have all these kawaii influences in metal.
I definitely believe it would have happened because it's not like it's again, I don't think there was a precedent for exactly what Baby Metal did, but there was definitely a lot of people playing with genre melding. There was a lot of that sort of crazes. I think we would have definitely have seen someone come up, but I think the whole way it would have appeared would have been different. Would it have been as effective? I don't know. I mean, would it have like broken down?
Therefore, maybe not
as
get
much?
As popular and
exactly. Yeah. I think Baby Metal was the perfect combination of mixing the genres, but doing it in a way that foreign audiences found it palatable, right down to the name. I said this about Bandmate, but it's the same with Baby Metal. It's the sort of thing where you don't have to, all you have to say is, I have this thing called Baby Metal, and people are just going to go, just play it to me so I know what the fuck you're talking about. That's
I also know people who are like, baby and metal, that just doesn't fit. I will never listen to this.
But that's probably more people who are metal fans. Like the thing which works
elitists.
for me is that the thing that works with Babe Metal is it won over the normies. It won over the people who were just sort of, like I say, I was just in a general party, just a normal party. I wouldn't say there was any leaning towards any genre. We were all just, most of my friends were music related, but it was, and then that came on and everyone was interested because
But it was in Japan, to be fair, right?
no, that was in London.
It wasn't. Oh, okay.
This was when that came out. I hadn't moved here at that time.
Well, this is the story with me as well, because I actually heard Baby Metal probably around 2014, and I remember somebody, I can't remember who it was, but I remember somebody putting it on, and I must have listened to it for like about 30 seconds, and I was like, "What the fuck is this?" and I didn't listen to Baby Metal again. Completely forgot who they were. Didn't even know they existed until like almost freaking 10 years later, well, not that long, about 8 years later, when somebody requested that I do a reaction to them. But that was just the phase of my life where I was then. I was only like, 14 myself when 15 when that came out, and at that time I was listening to your stereotypical Parkway Drive.
Still. You were born in 2000.
Yeah, wondering how old are you? Not sure if that.
Hold up a minute.
Yeah, I'm trying to think. How old was I back then?
He's trying to make himself younger. Is he not
trying to make myself younger? Now I was older.
Is it legal for
him to be I would have been early 20s back then.
Yeah,
I think so.
Yeah, so yeah, even then going back then, I was like much more into heavy Western music, so I never really gave it a chance. And then obviously with experience and age, as you kind of grow up, you kind of start to become maybe less elitist and more open and to branch into different things. So yeah, that helped, and I'm glad somebody recommended it, because it's one of those. And I think with Baby Metal as well, what's really good about them, or what was good about like Gimme Chocolate with the music videos as well, is they were so wacky and kind of like fun and out there that it was kind of harkening back to what me and Benedict do as for fun. It was so good to put something on to show your friends, just to see how they would really react, just so you could both like have a bit of fun and go, "What the fuck is this?"
Yeah.
But
it's still good music. It's not actually just throwaway bullshit. It's actually good music as well.
Yeah. I actually wanted to talk about Gimme Chocolate also, but we only have 2 minutes left, so I'm not sure.
On the free version of Zoom.
We have to do a separate video of Gimme Chocolate.
I think probably people have their opinions of Gimme Chocolate quite well cemented in at this point.
Well, I actually think it might be one of their best songs. Hot take.
Have you heard my remix of "Gimme Chocolate and Walk This Way" by Aerosmith?
I have not.
Check it out. It's on my channel. You wouldn't believe how well it works. it works way better than you want it to work.
I'm curious. I might go check that out as well.
I gotta drop that.
No, but just simply for the fact that I heard this song, probably, I don't know, the count on my phone is like at 270, but that's only the number on my phone. So plus reactions, probably double that, and then I don't know.
Well, if you look at the Spotify numbers,
probably around 500 times I heard this song, and still I love every second of it, and I never get bored for a second. So
yeah,
that's
100%.
a testament for a great song.
If you look at the moment you fell in love with Moa.
Not really, no. It was a gradual process.
Oh, dear.
Smile slowly reeled me in.
If you look at the Spotify numbers for Gimme Chocolate, they're actually like 2 times higher than like every other song on that album. I think that is is the most played song. Again, this is Spotify, not YouTube or anything like that. But I think on
but
Spotify,
also the
like
YouTube video made some kind of new record, I think.
Yeah, it was just one of those songs that you just like to play for your friend because it was funny, wacky. They hit everything on the nail. I can't tell you just how much at that time, at that place, with those girls and that music, how much they just got right. And I don't think there's billions of other dimensions and alternate realities where it just didn't pan out, and I feel like we're in the lucky one where it did.
Yes.
Right. Well, that's a great way to finish things off. We're about to wrap up. The time's about to run out. So I just say, get in the comments. Tell us what you think. Classic album. So good to talk to 2 proper Babe Metal fans who can really lay it out. But I think we all love this album. Let us know.
Do you want to hear
like outtracks and everything? And
keep your
ears
talk about the other albums too.
The East.
Let him talk. You gotta let him talk.
I've got 5 seconds. It's cool.
Why you're hassling here?